I will call the special meeting of May 23rd, 2023 to order, occurring both in person and via Zoom. City Clerk Guzetta, please take the roll call.
Councilmember Barbadillo.
Councilmember Lin. Here.
Vice Mayor Chua.
Here. And
Councilmember Fan.
Fan.
Present.
Mayor Montano.
And I am present. Thank you. Okay, now we will have the Pledge of Allegiance. Vice Mayor, would you like to take the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Okay, now let's move on to public forum. Members of the public are invited to speak only on the items on the agenda that are being discussed today. Public forum will be limited to 1 minute. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak? Mr. Montemayor, please come up.
Voltaire, Montemayor, Milpitas, the mayor, vice mayor, members of the city council, city manager and staff. Yeah, I was there, I think at the senior center last time, and I scribbled 1,000 words, and I don't remember much. But anyway, that's part of the agenda probably, so I will not touch it. I'm a sports-minded fellow. Like, I have three main things, but singing is not a sport probably. But I play chess a lot. I bowl. I am a basketball player. All those table tennis, ping pongs. I want Milpitas to have champion in this extracurricular activities. Like last night, I spent a lot of time already in playing chess. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else from the public? Seeing none, is there anyone from on Zoom?
I have no hands raised.
Thank you. Now moving on to the announcement of conflict of interest. City Attorney Moto Posse.
Thank you, Mayor. I ask you, Mayor, and each of the council members, whether he or she has any financial or personal conflict of interest related to any of the items on tonight's agenda.
Councilmember Barbadillo.
None.
Vice Mayor Chua.
None.
Councilmember Leanne.
None.
Councilmember Fan.
None.
Mayor Montano.
I am an none. Okay, now I will read the code of conduct. Be respectful and courteous. Words, tone, and body language do matter. Model civility. Avoid surprises. Praise publicly and criticize privately. Focus on the issue, not the person. Refrain from using electronic devices while on the council dais, and that is specifically cell phones. Disclose conflict of interest and affiliations related to agenda items. Separate governing from campaigning. The council speaks with one voice after making policy on issues. Respect the line between policy and administration. So City Council will hold one another accountable to comply with this code of conduct. And now moving on to the approval of the agenda. Is there anyone on the council that would like to make some changes to the agenda? Vice Mayor Chua?
The agenda.
Okay, is there a second? And this is moved by Vice Mayor Chua and seconded by Councilmember Barbadillo. And now we will call for the vote. Let's see. Councilmember Barbadillo,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chua,
Aye. Aye.
Fan.
Aye.
Okay, and I am an aye. So, and now we will go to receive the supplemental presentation. City Manager, contact.
Thank you, Mayor. So we have one agenda item, receive supplemental presentation on the fiscal year 2023-24 proposed City of Milpitas operating budget and provide feedback. And we will have Deputy City Manager Matt Kano and Finance Director Lauren Lai presenting on this item. Before I hand it off to them, I do have a few opening remarks. So good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. At the May 9th budget study session, we believe we heard support from the full council on the budget priorities and majority of the proposals in the proposed fiscal year 23-24 budget. We also heard your individual thoughts on some specific proposals and additional changes you wanted staff to consider. We've taken all of your feedback and spent time evaluating each of the ideas while considering several factors such as financial impacts, operational considerations, risk to the city, as well as legal mandates. We're hopeful that the recommended proposals before you today address several of the council ideas in a fiscally responsible manner, and we look forward to your discussion this evening. Director Lai and Deputy City Manager Kano will walk you through the proposed changes to the budget and share information about why staff is not recommending some of the ideas brought up at the May 9 study session. As you can see, all of the department heads and chiefs are also here to respond to any questions you may have about specific proposals. I am excited that we've been able to present council a balanced budget with a special focus on public works, public safety, and economic development. And with the additional proposed changes, we believe we are able to further enhance service levels while maintaining fiscal prudence. This evening, we look forward to receiving direction by council consensus on any changes you would like us to incorporate into the proposed fiscal year 23-24 budget, which is scheduled for adoption on June 6th. As I had mentioned at the May 9th study session, budget adoption on June 6th will allow staff adequate time to make all necessary changes for a July 1st implementation. Before I turn it over to Director Lai, I want to thank the Mayor and Council for your guidance and continued engagement through the budget process. We know this process takes several months and requires thoughtful deliberation over multiple meetings. I also want to thank the finance team and all the department heads and staff for their hard work in developing the budget, and of course, the Milpitas community for their input over the past few months. With that, I'll turn it over to Director Lai, and if we could have the slide deck up, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, members of the public. I'm pleased tonight to bring this back and continue our deliberation. Next slide, please. So this is a supplement to the May 9th study session, and I'm going to go over the agenda. So tonight we'll review the deliberation and feedback from Council on May 9th. We'll discuss the available funding as we had summarized on May 9th, and also summarize the proposed changes that we're excited to share with you. We'll also discuss alternatives and the reasons why we may not move forward with those, and certainly listen to your feedback, questions you might have, and hopefully tonight build more consensus as we go into June 6th. Next slide, please. So to summarize, as you could see here, the budget development is a lengthy process that's very comprehensive, including discussions with many different stakeholders. The arrow indicates that tonight, May 23rd, is an additional study session to firm up direction for our council to adopt the budget on June 6th. Next slide, please. What we heard on May 9th is summarized on this slide. So we're hopeful that we've listened well and that we've discerned and that we'll present to you something that resonates. On May 9th, what we heard was consideration of leading economic development as a standalone office and not consolidating econ dev and housing. We also heard that we may like to increase council travel by 5,000 for the mayor, vice mayor, and each council member. In addition, consider adding additional maintenance workers for the functions of streets, trees, parks, and landscape. Likewise, consider adding a city event for Black April, and at the same time, continuing the events for Lunar New Year and Lantern Festival. We also heard the consideration of retaining funding for the city attorney's office renovation projects, which was set aside when we adopted the budget of CIP on April 18th. We also heard considering not defunding the vacant building inspector position. Last but not least, the consideration of using partial funding from the 2 vacant IT analyst positions until they are filled. So what we'd like to present to you on the next slide is what funds are available. If we may go to that. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's talk about the critical factors first. Critical factors. In setting the table and talking about how we come forward with council, the recommendations tonight, things we really took to heart was the fact that the general fund forecast shows a very minimal surplus in fiscal 24-25. That surplus is under 1%. Likewise, the economic uncertainty continues. We have 2 bargaining groups under negotiations right now. We caution and are concerned about using one-time funding for ongoing services and personnel. When we look at our appropriations, which is basically the spending plan for the city, it's very important to consider operational priorities and the needs. And when we look at staffing or spending level, it's very important to look at the impacts on what we consider critical services to the city and managing our city risk. Last but not least, it's very important to have an overall balanced approach to delivering what we all pride ourselves in, which is high quality programs and services here for the city. Next slide, please. So available one-time funding, we mentioned this in the proposed budget. We also mentioned it on May 9th. Summarized before you are 2 categories. One is $398,400 from ARPA unallocated and the library contribution savings in this upcoming year. The other is $450,000 for the CIP funding of the city attorney office's renovation. We feel tonight and we believe that the recommendation summarized in table 1 is reasonable, and it would use $330,000 of one-time resources to add 2 positions and other services. So if you'll allow, we'll summarize those and also explain the recommendation further. Next slide, please. So here on table 1, also in the agenda report, is a summary of the recommendation of ongoing services and positions. First is to keep economic development office as is and move the housing function into the city manager's office under the leadership of the deputy city manager. The general fund impact would be neutral, as the housing fund would offset some of this deputy city manager's leadership over that function. Second is to increase the travel appropriation for the mayor, vice mayor, and council members by $5,000 each. Third is to add the Black April event as a city official annual event. Fourth and fifth is to add 2 maintenance worker, 1 maintenance worker in the streets department, 1 maintenance worker in the trees, parks, and landscape. In summary, that's $330,000 of ongoing cost and new services here to this community. How we would fund that in this next upcoming year is with the general fund library contribution savings, plus using the ARPA unallocated funds. The ARPA unallocated funds would carry those 2 positions for about 15 months, and then we would pick them up in fiscal year 24-25's budget. Likewise, below the orange, yellow, goldenrod row, is one-time cost. If council supports, what we are proposing is to amend the CIP budget and to appropriate the CIP project for the office renovations of the various staff members within the city attorney's office. Certainly, we will continue to evaluate cost-effective options. And again, that's $450,000 that's been set aside in the CIP budget that we would appropriate for this project. Next slide, please. So to illustrate in the office, the city manager's office, you'll see there in the yellow arrow, the housing division now would report to the deputy city manager, and the office of Econ Dev remains as is. Next slide, please. So I'll touch upon real quickly, this forecast is in the proposed budget, and we've talked about it before. It shows the minimal surpluses that we have for the next 5 years before the measure F is scheduled to expire. As we continue to add services and look at balancing the budget, it's important to keep this in mind. But again, we're very hopeful about the Table 1 summary of enhanced services that are before you. So now I'll turn it over to the deputy city manager.
Thank you, Director Eli. Matt Cano, Deputy City Manager. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Council members. Next slide, please. The slide in front of you provides a list of feedback we heard at the May 9th study session that we are not recommending for inclusion in the adopted operating budget. Continuing to fund the vacant building inspector at $194,700 ongoing cost. Public Works additional staffing above and beyond the two that we are recommending tonight. We're not recommending the third and fourth additional maintenance workers, and we're not recommending to partially defund the vacant IT analyst positions. The reasons for each of these not being recommended for inclusion are included in the following slides. Next slide, please. We're recommending similar to our proposed budget that we do not continue to fund the vacant building inspector position for the following reasons. Milpitas inspectors conduct an average of 6 inspections daily, which is 33 to 44% less than the industry standard of 9 or 10 inspections daily. We expect a projected 30% reduction in next fiscal year's building inspection revenues based upon current year activity. And if inspections and revenues increase, we can always adjust at mid-year to add an additional position funded by the additional revenue from new building inspections. Staff does not recommend funding the vacant building inspector position due to workload, service level, and revenue projections. Moreover, funding the vacant position would require $194,700 of cuts in other ongoing services. Next slide, please. The table on this slide provides some more data on building inspections. The table on the left shows over the past 3 years and projected in the next year workload for our building inspection team. As you can see, the number of inspections went down significantly in fiscal year 22-23 from 16,600 to 10,900. And we expect next fiscal year to be similar, to allowing our inspectors to stay at a reasonable workload of inspections per day. Our focus will continue to be on customer service. Currently, we schedule inspections 24 hours per day online or by phone, make appointments for services on the same day, and provide inspection results available online or by phone 24 hours a day. We keep inspection checklists and procedures posted online for easy reference, and we will continue to focus on streamlining and improving customer service and processes. Next slide, please. As noted by Finance Director Lai, we are proposing to add 2 additional Public Works maintenance workers as compared to our original proposal that we published in the proposed budget. However, we do not recommend adding a 3rd and 4th additional maintenance worker at this time. With the 2 additional, we are now proposing to add 7 new non-management staff to the Public Works team, which is a significant enhancement to the team. Onboarding of all these new staff will require a lot of time and recruitment that we're excited to take on. Our Director of Public Works is currently evaluating various functional areas in the department and staffing levels to improve operations and optimize service delivery. While it is possible that additional positions may be requested in future budget cycles, staff does not recommend adding a 3rd and 4th maintenance worker in the coming fiscal year. Next slide, please. As mentioned by Director Lai, staff does not recommend partially defunding 2 vacant IT analyst positions. The IT department supports critical city infrastructure and services, and critical services and risk management include, but are not limited to, cybersecurity, mitigating network threats, and supporting the 24/7 public safety operations. Recruitments for these critical positions are underway, and temporary staff are being onboarded in the interim. If funding is committed to other uses, the city will be unable to fill these critical positions. If staff had to return to council to appropriate additional funding when qualified candidates were identified, such delay could result in losing these candidates in the current competitive labor market. Therefore, staff does not recommend any defunding of vacant IT positions as it would negatively impact the department and citywide operations. Next slide, please. Tonight, staff is requesting council deliberation and consensus to direct staff to update the proposed budget in preparation for a public hearing and budget adoption. The next step is the adoption of the fiscal year 23-24 budget scheduled for June 6th. Next slide, please. This final slide is a repeat for your consideration and discussion this evening and shares staff's recommended budget adjustments based on feedback we heard at the study session a few weeks ago. And we feel this is our best professional recommendation to move forward and really look forward to your feedback and input this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. My thoughts are going over this. I have some questions on the first part of this, and this was, if you can bring that slide back up that you just left. There was the synopsis of what you. Thank you. So if you can clarify, number one, cost neutral for this general fund, partially fund deputy city manager with a housing fund. Now, I think that one, so I'm still unclear where you said partially fund the deputy city manager with a housing fund. Can you clarify on that?
Excellent question. So because the deputy city manager will be overseeing housing, some of the costs associated with that leadership will be covered and paid for by the housing fund.
And how much will that be?
About $80,000 a year.
Okay. And the other one is the number 3, add a city event for Black April, 5,000 funded by a one-time funding. When you say one-time funding, are you saying that it's just one time in that year?
Thank you for the question, Mayor. So what we're proposing is for 23-24, since this wasn't in the proposed budget, the 5,000 and any of these on here would be funded by the one-time funds we had talked about at the May study session. If this event continued on an ongoing basis, it would be folded into the 24-25 budget funding for that.
Okay. And then the other one, add one additional maintenance worker in public works, but there was one that you do not want to, I think it's.
Yes, so we're proposing one each, so a total of 2 additional ones in addition to what's in the proposed budget. And this is based on council feedback at the May 9 study session and more discussions with the director of public works. So what we're proposing is 1 in streets and 1 in the trees, parks, landscape division. But what we're not recommending is adding a 3rd and a 4th maintenance worker.
And see, this is where I differ. I really believe that we need more people in public works because the public sees, all the work that does on the streets, the trees. And I truly believe that's where we need more funding. I don't think that we need funding in, there is one position, after rereading it again in the city manager's position, I think it's the management analyst. I do not feel that is necessary. And if you have an argument for that, then go ahead and let me know.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So the management analyst is to oversee all of the work related to the task/metro area. So it will be funded by the task funds. And it's really to oversee kind of all the projects, the funding coming in, and then also making sure that the infrastructure projects are happening. So it's not a general fund position, and it's for that specific purpose.
Well, who does that now?
So it hasn't been, again, the task sets aside some money for program administration and management, and we have not had a dedicated position. So it's been parts of people, and it's a significant amount of money, which is why we're recommending doing that. We also, as we've mentioned to council before, we have some legislative changes on how the fees will be collected and an update of the fees. So there's a lot of complexity, and which is why this position would be funded. We couldn't use that funding source to fund additional maintenance workers.
Yeah, okay. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few clarification questions in line with your questions as well, Mayor. Let's go to city manager. And if you look at the org chart, the
May
city
we have
manager-
slide 8, please?
And Vice Mayor, because of the change, the proposed change on the economic development and housing, we have a new org chart. So if we want to.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
My question is, on this management analyst, I don't understand why, even if you say, I don't understand why this is not a one-time funding. Well, on the other hand, you have the maintenance workers as one-time funding. I don't get that. And I don't agree with that.
Okay, so let me just clarify how we're using the words then. Because what we have so far in the budget, we presented on May 9th a balanced budget, taking into consideration ongoing revenues. If we're adding what we've presented in table 1, those are ongoing costs. We're presenting it with one-time money for the next year because those dollars that we're presenting to you tonight, which is ARPA and the library contribution savings, those are one-time resources.
I get that.
Okay.
I could say that I will fund this management analyst one time. I could do that. Same way I would do with the public works. What's the difference? How are you making a difference between public works and this position? And it's true to all the positions that were proposed.
So may
That's I don't need an answer on that one. So let's look at the community development. It's the same here. You have. I don't agree with not funding the building inspector. I see that as essential work because we get a lot of complaints. Let me just preface this before I move on. At the May 9th meeting, you got recommendations from us. There was no decision, but recommendations based on your initial proposal to the council. Now, today, we are hearing your professional input twice already, or many times, the last few meetings. That is your professional recommendation to us. But it's really up to the council to make the decisions. You know, we can listen to your professional recommendations, but it's us, the majority of the council, that will make the decisions. I just want to make that clear. Okay, on the finance, I have a clarifying question. The finance manager, is that a new position? Because there was no color on this before.
Yeah, we had to add the color. I think we talked about that
Yeah,
previously.
is it green?
Yes, it's going to be
So it's a
green.
new position.
It's a reclassification of a customer service supervisor position to a finance manager position. So we already have a position, a customer service supervisor position, and we're reclassifying it to finance manager.
And that would have a different compensation range.
Correct. And it would have different responsibility and scope of work.
What is the issue that's being addressed, making that a reclassification?
Great question. So as you could see there in the org chart in fiscal services, that area oversees all of utility billing, business license, TOT, revenue collection, miscellaneous billings. And when we initially contemplated the customer service supervisor position, we felt it was adequate. It did not work out. That model did not work. And so during this budget cycle, we are proposing to make that modification so that way we can make that operation better operationally and provide better customer service.
Did you do a matrix, performance matrix, where you can say, this is what it was, didn't work, so I want to do this? What matrix did you use to measure your service?
Well, we actually filled that position. We filled the position for a year, and it was not effective in the way we contemplated. And in this budget cycle, we want to take the opportunity to always improve on what we learn.
So I don't get it. You filled it, but you filled it with a lower level position.
It's no longer filled. It's vacant now.
With a lower.
We had a
Even
customer
lower.
service supervisor position in the prior year budget. We recruited for it. We filled it. We tried that model. It was not successful. The position has been vacant. And what we're proposing now is to improve on what we've learned.
Well, what I'm saying is, it didn't work. I mean, now you're elevating that position that didn't work. I don't get the logic behind that.
The logic behind that is that we did not appreciate that fiscal services overseeing all of utility billing. Now, keep in mind, utility billing includes all of water, sewer. The operation includes all of our business license administration, all of TOT, all of front desk banking and deposits, all of centralized mail. That operations is what we see downstairs on the first floor. That operation needs a managerial position. We didn't appreciate that previously when we contemplated the supervisor position. It deemed inadequate. And I think professionally, we can't recommend it again to you based on what we've observed already.
I don't get it. I mean, just by reclassifying the position higher, you think that it will solve the problem that you had.
Correct, because the classification has larger responsibilities. When we post this position, it will have a higher level of qualification that we're going to look for, and we're going to expect higher output and outcome and managerial and leadership experience and responsibilities.
I just want to let you know, I don't agree with it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next one would be HR. This one is title change. So I just want to reiterate with Nick, this is just a title change, no compensation range change, right? Compensation range stays the same.
That is correct.
That's all I wanted to.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. In information technology, your recommendation is not to fund, is to fund extra. Those two positions that I asked not to fund. And your rationale is, it's interesting because the rationale was you think IT or Ashwini, that you can handle it. I mean, this is interesting to me. The rationale of not funding 2 more public works, you said at the initial, because you need a lot of time. You need a lot of time to train the new public works. And here we are, at the IT department, you said you can handle 5. Well, 5 new positions. My issue with this is, how can you handle 5 when there's only like 7 people right now currently? Or I counted the org chart. How can you expect to, granted you can hire 5 at the same time. How do you expect the retention issue? How could you keep these people, these 5 people, if you don't train them well, if you don't get them acclimated to the new workplace?
Can we get
That's my
slide
issue.
14, please? Slide 14.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So we actually have a total of 4 vacant IT positions, IT analyst positions right now.
Is it 5 or 4?
It's 4.
You keep going back and forth, even at the last meeting. I'm really confused.
Yeah, it's 4 positions that are vacant. So not all positions have been vacant for extended period of time. So right now we have 4 vacant positions because it's a snapshot in time. Right now we happen to have 4 positions, but 1 internal promotion vacated this year made 1 vacancy, and 1 left the city for a promotional opportunity at another city, also vacated this year, and 1 was filled from a recruitment, but she was not a good fit.
Let me stop you right there.
Okay.
How many vacant positions do you have?
We have 4 IT analyst positions that are vacant.
All IT analysts.
That's correct.
Oh,
So
Vice Mayor.
this, hold on a
Vice-
second, hold on. You said to reclass the video media
Yes.
analyst to IT analyst.
Yes.
Making it 4, but there is a GIS technicians that is open.
Oh, when you said 5 positions, is it 4? I thought we were just speaking specifically about IT analyst positions. We have 4 IT analyst positions that's vacant and 1 GIS technician position, which we are hiring right now.
That's what I'm saying. You have 5 vacant positions in your department.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Another question that I have is a move from economic development for a senior admin analyst. Obviously, that was requested by you because it's being moved. Is that true? Am I correct on that?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So that is moving from building safety and housing, the senior admin analyst, not from economic development. And the reason that is being proposed to move is because it works on technology systems. Specifically, it's funded also by a technology fund. It was initially put in building safety and housing when it first started. It was introduced, I think, about 3 years ago. And it really works on technology systems that don't only serve building, they also serve planning, fire, land development. So that's why because it's enterprise-wide, we are seeing that it would function better in IT rather than in one department, given that it needs to serve multiple departments.
So what's the rationale again? So you're saying that you're moving from building and coding department, this senior admin analyst, what's the need over at IT?
It's the role of the position's role stays the same, right? It's working on technology systems. Right now, it's housed only in building, It's supposed to work with all the different departments, right, that work on community development projects. So this is development projects, right? Permitting, all of that, the submittals, the coordination. So given that it works with different technology systems for different departments, it's really more an enterprise-wide role, which is why we're proposing to move it. It has to work closely with IT anyway. It has to work with GIS. It has to work with IT security policy. So it makes more sense from that perspective to have it in that department. That's why we're proposing the move.
Wouldn't that burden the management team over at IT?
So the business,
considering that this is being moved, another position to manage?
yes, but functionally that makes more sense for the city, because otherwise you have different technology systems being used.
How long has this position been under building and coding?
About 3 years. It hasn't always been filled, but it's been about 3 years. This was developed. This was introduced when we did the matrix study in 2019. And one thing I just wanted to point out, there's a business systems analyst. That position is also supposed to work on enterprise-wide systems. So this position anyway needs to work closely with that.
That's the nature of the IT, is to work on the enterprise, the whole city.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing new about that.
Right. And we don't have IT positions in other departments, right? We generally have them all centralized. We have a centralized IT model. So this just supports that.
So the way I see it is you're moving this position because of functionality, not to address issues or crisis or challenges in this department. That's the way I see it. It's just functionality.
Functionality and supporting operations and functions throughout the city, not just for one.
Well, I would think that it's still doing that already.
Yes, but it doesn't, because it's not an IT, some of the security concerns and stuff, it's much better if it's in IT, given that it has to work closely with IT staff.
But it has been done for 3 years. No, I'm not done yet.
I know, but
Excuse
you
me.
cannot dominate the whole. We
I-
have 4 or 5 council.
I'm not
You
done.
cannot do that.
I have the floor.
Vice Mayor has the floor.
These are clarifying
So-
questions.
Where you're keeping the panel so that you can control. who
Excuse me, you're out of order.
You're out of order.
She's almost done. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay, I think that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And-
No, with
Oh,
IT.
with this one, okay.
But I'm not done. Okay, this community recreation public works.
Can I make a suggestion and because Councilmember Barbadillo is next and then
Oh, okay.
after, and then we can
Okay,
come
I'll-
back. Let's
I'll-
make the rotation.
Okay, I'll take my,
Councilmember Lynn.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't have any questions, but I am very uncomfortable sitting here seeing council members, because on the code of conduct saying that council members speak in one voice. And to see how you ask the questions, I'm sure there are many ways of asking questions. But I feel very uncomfortable for staff. And everybody knows that city council makes decision. Staff did propose that. On the last meeting, okay, consolidation of the econ director and housing. You didn't see it today. Black April, it was discussed, you saw it today. City Attorney's Office discussed, you saw it today. And you make it sound like the staff brought back something that it was never discussed. This is a completely new proposal. And you belittle the work that staff is doing. And for me, I am one of the council member, and I do not want another council member to represent my voice in that way. So I would like to make that clear. I do not have questions, but please treat staff with respect. Council members come and go. Staff is the people who's going to stay and runs the city. Keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Councilmember Barbadillo. Did you have your hand raised?
I lost my thought for a while. All right. It's heated, but it's Socratic, right? No, we are here to deliberate. We respect the efforts put on this proposed budget, and budget that will be passed is based not only on the good work of the staff, but also thoughts from the community spoken by the council members. So that's where I'm coming from every time deliberations comes about, and those thoughts are just resonance of people from the community. Well, that's our job. I respect to disagree that whenever someone is talking, it's about negativity of the process, because in the end, it's gonna be us who's gonna decide what's the rightful budget, and every question and every answer to this determination is fair game, right? And it's unfortunate, we do have one voice, but that voice will be the vote. The diversity of the opinions is something that each and every one of us takes from the community, and that's what we deliver. But I agree, we'll have one voice at the end. When we have a good, feasible, and accountable budget for the city. Here's my questions. I do have some questions. So I'll start with the organizational structure of the city. And it seems to me from previous meetings that we have, there's been proposals, there's been counter proposals, there's thoughts. And for me to fully understand it, I would like to see, if we have it in the slide, the past organizational structure that we have in flowcharts, and what exactly was being proposed today. Do we have that? Can we put that in the screen?
Councilmember Barbadillo, on the slides, we do have what is being proposed. For the past ones, I think maybe we can, let's see what we can do, because we don't have it in the proposed budget, right? It shows the changes. We could walk you through what is, if that works. If not, maybe we can get a copy of the current budget.
Okay. While we work on that, I'll throw my second question. So it's, it was the first few slides that were shown. It's where it was discussed that we have a very conservative 1% surplus. We have a concern with regards to the MOUs and stuff like that. Would someone put that back to the screen, please? While doing that, to me, at least on my one vote and an opinion, a good budget is balance. And I've heard that throughout the presentation, but the balance is to be feasible, right? It's true that we cannot predict what expenses we will have and what sources of funds we will have in the future. But a well-calculated and educated guess is what, at least again, on my one opinion and vote, is trying to see. Because we cannot predict it, but we have litmuses. We have, facts and information that we could rely and comfortably propose. Yes, we can afford this. This is something that we need, and it's sustainable. So the critical factors, here's the first thought that I have. So we do have three groups that were two currently we are talking with, and another two later on as we go on forward. So the question is, with regards to these four groups, what percentage of the budget did we put? Okay, what percentage did we put in the budget with regards to these four groups?
Can take it. Councilmember Barbadillo, while maybe Director Lai is coming up, we have made some assumptions in the budget. Typically, if we have an MOU, which is current, we use those numbers. So whatever's been agreed to for COLAs, we use that in the budget for the assumptions. If we do not have an MOU, we do make an assumption of 3%, up to 3%, but the final number is going to be determined by the negotiations.
Right. So the first question on that is, since we are for purposes of projecting the budget, we are using the current MOU percentages, right? So which part of the revenue generating policies that we have or sources of funds would be available for the margin of error of what we are projecting?
Can you rephrase the question just to make sure I understand it?
Right. So now we know that we're projecting the budget based on the current MOUs that we have, right? And the question is, are we ready? Because the current MOUs either will definitely move up, will be less likely to be retained the numbers where they were, or can be retracted back. Other than other more drastic measures to even it up as we continue to work with these four groups. So the question, without disclosing so much, is what feasible sources of funds would we be able to tap just in case the projections that we had, which are the current MOUs, will assure us that, going forward, regardless of what kind of contracts we have with our workers, with these groups, we are able to sustain it.
I will answer the question from a greater level, regardless of whether we're talking about contract negotiations or any of the significant assumptions in the budget. I think taxpayers and council members should understand that we're always monitoring our financial position. We're looking at major revenues and major expenses on an ongoing basis. If we see red flags, we're going to be reacting pretty assertively. I think that's very important. The other aspect is, and so hence on the expenditure side, we're managing costs. And if we see red flags, we're going to implement some assertive measures pretty quickly. And that's apart from MOU negotiations or regardless. On the revenue side, we're always monitoring major line items, ensuring that we do revenue compliance to ensure revenues come in. And if revenues are coming in stronger, we're going to monitor that as well. So that's my reassurance to you, council member, regardless if it's MOU or otherwise, that, like you said, the budget is a set of estimates based on what information we know today. That set of information evolves over time. And that's why we present to council quarterly reports and we present to council mid-year updates. So I want to reassure you that we monitor our actuals, we monitor our financial position. Every director you see here, including myself and the city manager's office, is monitoring our expenses every day.
Yeah, that's a question really less for my benefit, because I know.
Absolutely.
I know that you have worked so hard and you wouldn't post any number without a basis. That question is for the community. When someone asks us later on, hey, why did you put this much of a budget here? Why did we hire people here? Well, at least now it's on the record that you have answered that.
Absolutely.
The city. So there's an interesting part of the transmittal letter from the city manager. It says that we have worked with the ARPA funds to towards a balanced and sustainable budget. The question is what could have happened? Hypothetical. This is a hypothetical question, but I want us to understand that ARPA funds just came from nowhere, right? It landed to our war chest, and we're using that as a tool, as something to supplement the way our budget is being projected. So and ARPA funds will drop, right? So probably not this mid-year budget, but next time. So what is our contingency once ARPA funds are gone?
Would you like
Thank you, Council Member. So the way we plan the expenditures for ARPA funds, they were either used for one-time programs that help residents and businesses, and those are one-time funds. They're one-time programs. They will end after the ARPA funding is gone. For city programs, infrastructure, that's one-time funding. And where we used in limited circumstances, we used it for staffing. It was only meant to fund like for a year, public safety positions. And it's already, the ongoing costs are already built into the budget. And if Director Lai wants to add anything else.
Correct, I concur. They're one-time programs. Anything that's contemplated to be sustainable should be sustained within general fund resources.
Right. So yeah, that's what I want to hear, right? It's sustainable because we do have that in general funds, and that general fund can generate funds from sources that we have. And it's good to know that yes, we use the ARPA funds as a tool to enhance our post budget, but it's also great to hear that we can sustain the general fund.
Absolutely. It was a very important principle that guided the development of the 5 investment areas for ARPA. So
So you made a comment with regards to a 1% surplus.
yes.
What should we understand about that?
Sure. If I may have that slide, it's the 10-year forecast slide, please. I think it's maybe about 4 or 5 slides from here.
Slide 9.
Thank you. Yes, so as you may recall, the 10-year forecast is the general fund forecast. When I say the 1%, I'm talking about fiscal year 24, 25, where we have about $1.2 million annual surplus. So when we take $1.2 million over the projected budget for that year, that's about 1%.
Is that a conservative projection, or is something within our, the finance guidelines?
2 separate questions. Are the assumptions in this budget conservative? Yes, we are in an economic uncertain time, so the assumptions here are conservative. Is a 1% surplus within a guideline? I don't think there's guidelines necessarily for the degree of surplus. The guideline always is to make sure that the budget is structurally balanced. So having a surplus is positive, but as we could see here, their surplus is pretty minimal.
Also, surplus is different from the concept that will be off with a number. Let's say always there is a 10% on the general fund, something like that. Is that a different concept?
Say that again. I want to make sure I understand the
I think
question.
there's a financial concept, especially running a city, that a certain percentage should be maintained as a buffer for right.
Okay. So we're talking about the reserves and the savings. So we have that.
Slide. Next slide, please. We have the reserve.
Okay.
You could have slide 10, please. Slide 10. That has the general fund reserves.
I believe it's in the backup slide. Slide 42, please. So while we're getting a
What slide?
Slide 42. Thank you. 42. So the forecast shows the ongoing revenue and ongoing expenses for the general fund. And we want that to always be zero or positive. Any savings we have is summarized on this slide, which is basically our reserves. So in this slide here, you could see the audited financial statements for June 30th of 22. We have general fund contingency of 18.5 million, budget stabilization of 18.5 million, and a couple of other line items as well. So this is where there's a lot of governing guidelines and city policy. It's very prescribed. So when we have surpluses, it'll continue to build these reserves for the city. And then some of it also goes into infrastructure funding as well.
Right. So the percentages of these reserves that we have, Lucas, is it within a comfort zone with regards to what should be in our reserve as compared to, I mean, in the financial world?
Yes. Let me see if we can find that. Great. May I have slide 47, please? So if I understand the question now is, given the reserve we just presented, how does that fare relative to other agencies, maybe? Okay. Slide 47, please, is our analysis. And what we did was we looked at 43. It's a table that starts with general fund reserve summary.
It's 43, I think, on the backup slide.
Thanks. Thank you. So what we did here, council members, was we looked at all the cities within the county and we measured the contingency reserve, budget stabilization, unassigned, and our pension savings. We have $73 million. And during that year, when we looked at this in comparison with our audited operating general fund expenditure, we have a ratio of about 63%. And as you could see there, we ranked third in terms of savings levels. Half of the agency, if you look at the 50 percentile and above, is 50% and above. So we fare pretty well from a savings perspective. And you could see below there, it's only like 33%. So overall, we feel pretty good about this level, especially when we compare it with other agencies within our county.
And these funds will respond to contingencies if ever there are.
Absolutely. And during the pandemic, we definitely exercised that to stabilize our service delivery, at the same time deal with the fallout of revenue losses. And we definitely exercised that and used the contingency reserve. And when funds were available, we restored them.
Right. Have we put back those contingency reserves that we spent during the pandemic?
Absolutely. So if I may have that slide again, 42 it was, I think right before that, where we had the summary, 18.5 million and 18.5 million. Thank you. You'll see there, council member, the trend over the last 5 years. We had 17.3 million during that fiscal year. We had to appropriate some money, and when we had surpluses, we put it back in. So we continue to grow that balance. Because during some of those fiscal year, council actually allowed up to $4 million to be used. And at the end of the year, when we had one-time revenues, we immediately restored them. So that's why you're not seeing big dips in those balances, because our number one priority was to reserve those resources for our future day funds.
All right. If everything was right on our projections on the budget, do we expect adding more to the general funds, or we're just where they are, or are we going to dip into them again?
Is the question, are we anticipating adding to that reserve or
Yes.
utilizing those reserves?
Yes.
We are not proposing utilizing those reserves whatsoever. And as surpluses are derived at the end of each fiscal year, June 30th is the close of the fiscal year. We go through an audit. Once the audit determines what our final balance is we allocate resources into those reserves in accordance with a city adopted policy. We do not recommend using those resources in this budget or any future budgets.
All right. Okay, I'm done with that. Then once we have that organizational structure, actually my question on that is a necessity, affordability, and affordability. You know, I would want the public to see what we had as a structure in the last 2 or 3 years, and I would justify to them the proposed reorganization in structure and reclassifications that had been proposed to be something that we can afford and to be something that we really need. So whenever during this meeting there's an answer to that, I would be happy to come back and then look at it again.
May I summarize?
Yes.
Is the confidence you're wanting from us is that consolidation is something we can afford?
2 prongs: afford and a need.
Okay.
Whenever I ask for those 2 prongs, I would want basis. I do love your assurances, but it's just me that I cannot be convinced with an assurance without presenting me something that would supplement that assurance.
I'll speak to
And I'm sure you do have that. As I said, half of my question is me, and the other answer to that is the community.
I'll speak to the fiscal impact.
please.
Maybe a acting city manager can speak to the service delivery and the need. On May 9th, we presented the consolidation to council, and the fiscal impact to the general fund is a savings of $433,000. The overall savings is $222,000. We feel that this is going to enhance service delivery and create a lot of other benefits. And importantly, it doesn't create any employee layoffs. So I'll turn it over to acting city manager Talk if she wants to add to the service delivery and immediate need
Right.
side
So
of it.
that probably answers the fiscal part,
Okay.
feasibility, and the necessity would be something that.
Thank you, Council Member. And if we could have slide 52 from the backup deck up, please. I also want to just check in to see if we have the existing org charts, because we can walk you through what's proposed, but I know you're interested in the existing org charts. So I'll speak to 2 of the proposed consolidations. As you know, on May 9th, we were discussing 3 potential consolidations. Hearing your feedback, we're only proposing to move forward with 2 of the consolidations. So the first one I'd speak to is Public Works and Engineering. So we have 2 different departments right now. And we started to look at the consolidations from an operational perspective and kind of looking at some of the challenges we face because of some naturally created silos within different existing departments. So engineering and public works work on projects, work on infrastructure, the same infrastructure, but with 2 different standards and 2 different delivery methods right now. So one of the things we wanted to make sure is with this consolidation, we would have all of those related functions under one director. And we believe that that would provide much more enhanced service levels to the community, because eventually every project that's designed now has to be maintained by Public Works. So right now the project's being designed by engineering for CIP and maintained by Public Works. When you have both those functions working in close collaboration, it provides for a much better product for the community and the city. And so on the slide that you see in front of you, it really talks about, again, we do have savings and it is affordable. As you asked in your first question, we do have savings from the consolidation, but that was not the primary driver. It was really to look at functional areas, to look at service delivery, and to see how we should organize. As we've shared with you before, both these consolidations that we're bringing forward, they are pretty much the norm in most of the other cities in Santa Clara County. They are not, engineering and public works is typically not separated, neither are building, planning and code enforcement. And again, not to just do it because other cities are doing it, but there's a reason why they are organized that way. And it really provides for a better experience for the community on the community development side too. We also believe with the consolidation and what we're proposing, it would actually have allow us a better focus on economic development. I did want to, as I said on May 9th, this was not designed to look at it from employee layoffs perspective. So did want to assure the employees in the community that is not an intended outcome of this. And again, the focus really is on improved collaboration and accountability. When you have different functions under one leader, the single point of accountability also really works in the best interest of the community and the city. And happy to provide details on kind of the org structures. I'm just checking in to see if we have existing org charts we could pull up, or maybe even have copies printed. We can bring up the proposed org charts. I'll have to ask them for the slides. Sorry, we have a lot of backup slides, so we kind of have to work through the numbers. So if we could bring up slide 25 for the Community Development Department and slide 31 after that.
And honestly, as we go down the organizational flowchart, I feel unequipped to question those additions that each department is proposing. So for now, if we could just go to this organizational structure that we propose on like the director level going up. I think it's part of your presentation. It's under the city profile organizational chart. I think that's the one that you are proposing on those levels.
Yes, and Councilmember Bardavillo, just to clarify, are you wanting us to just go through the ones that are proposed for consolidation or all different departments?
Right. As I said, for now, just the major departments, the higher level, from the director up. If there's a comparison of what has been proposed and what we had been before, and probably things will be cleared when we see side by side. Oh, this is where classified. This is where it's thing, and then or questions arise and answers. I would clarify that. As I said, in respect to other thoughts, we can put this in the back while we work on that as a visual. And we can go forward with the rest of the discussion.
I just want to confirm if the slides are ready. Right after community development should be planning and building safety housing. Can we put planning up and building safety housing up? Slide 26, I think it was just remitted. The next slide.
Mayor, you can entertain.
Councilmember Barbadio, I'll just walk you through first the Community Development Department. So what is being proposed and kind of explain what's current. So right now we have building safety and housing as one department and planning as one department. And so what we're proposing in the Community Development Department is to combine planning, which is a separate department, and then to combine building and code enforcement from the Building Safety and Housing Department. So it would have three functional areas that work really closely together. And in terms of kind of what's changing, building would pretty much stay as is. So it would be its own division. Instead of being a standalone department, it would be a division in this new Community Development Department. And then planning, because now it's again going to be a division, there's a reclassification there. We are proposing to reclassify a principal planner to a planning official, similar to the building official, because that position then would manage all of planning. And then we have code enforcement, which would directly report to the community development director. And the community development director then basically has kind of three functional areas reporting to it. So really it's one reclassification that we're proposing as part of this from at a higher level, one reclassification that's being proposed. Principal planner to a planning official. Would you like more detail on the department, or should I go into the public works one?
Oh, this is fine. If we can move on to the.
Okay, so for public works, what we're proposing is when we combine public works and engineering, right now we have a director of engineering position that also acts as a city engineer. So when it combines, what we're proposing to do is deleting the director position. So a director of engineering would be deleted. However, a city engineer position, which is equivalent to the other public works director position, would be added. So you would have sort of the CIP part of it, utility planning, other planning and design and construction. Under public works, along with under the city engineer, along with transportation and traffic and land development. So engineering is pretty much under this new division, under the city engineer. And that's the sort of reclassification or an add delete, however you look at it, where you're deleting a director of engineering position and adding a deputy instead, which functions as the city engineer. This move also allows us to bring in utility planning, which works closely with design and construction under the city engineer. And given all of the master plans that we've approved and the majority of projects that we need to implement under utilities, this makes sense in terms of working closely together. And then the rest of public works stays pretty similar. I mean, we have some new positions proposed, but really, in terms of consolidation, this is the change.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilmember Barbadillo. Next, we have, is there anyone else that would like to speak? Let's have.
You want to go first? You can go first. Sure. Okay. Yeah. No. First of all, Lauren, you're doing a great job. I know it's a stressful position, and all of us appreciate you. I think we're all very passionate about our ideas. Sometimes we disagree on them, but we do acknowledge the work that you and your team does. So thank you. So if we can go back to the reorganization, I want to help me understand better what exactly we're doing with the more or less land development wing of our city.
Sure. Maybe we can have the the city manager's office org chart on the original deck. It's slide 8, please. Thank you. So if I understand the question, is it relating to economic development?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're proposing tonight, based on what we discerned from the May 9th deliberation, is to keep Econ Dev separate as is and move housing into the city manager's office under the leadership of the deputy city manager. We are enhancing economic development with the permit navigator position, which we feel will have outcomes and enhancements to the development sector and also streamline the process for these important stakeholders. So you'll see there in the org chart right there, Econ Dev remains pretty much as is in the current organization with the enhancement of one position, which is the permit navigator under the title of Administrative Analyst 2.
During the last budget study session, the consolidation, the reorganization, if I recall correctly, it was housing, economic development, and building safety.
No, so the consolidation would have been the Office of Economic Development and Housing, because staff feels there is synergy between economic development, real estate, land use, and housing. So that was the original proposed budget. So
I recall housing and planning and economic development. Was that not
no,
okay? Well,
it was economic development
Mhm.
and housing because there's synergy there.
Okay. No, I certainly recognize the synergy. But why would we? Well, two things. I don't recall having a conversation about integrating housing with under the deputy city manager's purview. What's the
Thank you,
impetus?
Councilmember Fan. So last time, as you recall, we did present consolidating economic development and housing.
Correct.
It would still be an office and it was still under the city manager's office, right? Because both economic development and housing are high priorities. It was still part of the CMO. We heard from council and we did share kind of looking at other cities and how they're organized. Economic development and housing is not a very usual combination. We felt like we were kind of seeing the synergy and the overlap of functions, but we heard from the council some concern about having those combined. We still recognize that overlap. And so what we're proposing today, depending on council feedback, how we want to move forward, but what we're proposing is sort of a compromise where we would still have housing in the city manager's office, recognizing it's a high priority, recognizing again the connection, the important connection between economic development and housing. But instead of having it under economic development, we would have it in the manager's office under the DCM, and we would still be kind of working closely. Part of the concern we heard from council was we didn't want to combine it so as not to dilute the focus on economic development. And so just taking that into consideration, this is what we're proposing. We think we will still get to the objective of having that closed integration between the two, still keep it really high priority and part of the city manager's office. And so this was sort of a compromise proposal.
I mean, previously, if the previous reorganization proposal had moved forward, a new position would have been created. What was that position?
We were proposing to reclassify, council members. So we're proposing to reclassify the Office of Economic Development Director to a Director of Economic Development and Housing. So we were looking at a reclassification, which is not then being proposed as part of this budget or part of today.
And that was the title that was used in the last.
That's correct. We had a new position in economic development, which we're still proposing to do independent of the consolidation, and that's the permit navigator position.
Yeah, I think I don't really understand the new proposal because I'm not quite sure what exactly it accomplishes. that deviates from the model that exists in place. If anything, I would imagine that housing would have more synergy with, for example, planning, and even building safety. I know there's some shortcomings working together there, but at the end of the day, what economic development did in combination with housing and other departments, we were able to get our housing element approved. By the way, we got our housing element approved by the state. So that's really positive news. If you hadn't heard about that yet, that was quite recent. And I do want to express sincere gratitude to all staff and the consulting team on making that happen. That was a huge project of Director Andrade's added interim management tasks assigned. Back to what we're discussing right now, though, what are the areas that our deputy city manager oversees? 'Cause it's been a while since I reviewed that. If you could refresh my memory.
Sure, and I'll respond to that. He just went to see if
Sure,
he
no
could get
worries.
copies of the org chart. So right now he is overseeing Public Works, Engineering, and Recreation and Community Services. Since our Director of Engineering is vacant, he is also acting as the interim city engineer, but we will fill that position hopefully soon. So that's his responsibility. This would not, what we're proposing wouldn't go into effect until July. And then just going back to your previous comments, council member, yes, housing could be with planning. I mean, building safety, we didn't really see a lot of connection, but it could be with planning. One of the reasons that's not being proposed is with the proposed community development department, we already have a planning director kind of take on now 3 different functional areas, and then adding housing, which requires a lot of attention, didn't feel like it would position the director for success with so many things being added on. And so,
No, I understand that, and I do agree with you there. It's just I think the same can be said for the areas or the broad areas of service that Matt's overseeing, recreation and public works, which other ones did you mention?
So Public Works, Engineering, and Recreation and Community Services. So if this proposed consolidation goes forward, it'll be 2 departments. It'll be Public Works and Rec and Community Service.
Yeah, I know it'll be 2 departments, but if it's being overseen by one person, it's hard for me to not separate that. It feels as if we're combining public works, recreation, engineering, and housing, which I would imagine wouldn't be as efficient as the original proposed reorganization. That's a lot of service areas, and I give kudos to Matt. It's not easy, and I would imagine it would be not easy either with the added role of overseeing housing. This is a almost entirely different area that hardly intersects to the level that would require a reorganization. So that's where I have difficulty moving forward. And then, I want to take a look at our executive organization. Is it most efficient for us to have the model the way that we have it? We do have a strong, but also multiple executive departments. And, I want to bring up the question to my colleagues if this is, in a year where we have to decide the direction of the city's finances, if we're going to continue to be in the green in the future, if we want to move forward with the model that is currently in place. So I'll leave that up for discussion if my colleagues want to chime in there.
Thank you, Councilmember Fan. Now we have
Your turn. Piggybacking on Councilmember Fan's remarks. As stated at the report, staff report, we are the whole country, our city is faced with continued war in Europe, high interest rates, high inflation rates, continued supply chain challenges, tech company layoffs, banking sector uncertainty, and now we have the debt ceiling issue that should be resolved in 8 days or so. And also on top of that, we in a couple months, in the months coming, we will have a new executive team because of a new city manager. So those are factors that why is it now with all those different challenges? Why do the consolidation now? Why do reclassification of different positions, bringing them up on a higher salary level? Why? Why are we? What is? I can see the rationale. You want to put functionality align with certain groups. On the other hand, there will be a new city manager, and we want, I don't know, my one thought, we want to give this person a free hand, leave everything the same except for new hires that are needed. And that's what I think a part of what Councilmember Fan was saying, why is there a change? So those are my thoughts right now after the meeting from last May 9th. So I'll put that. I haven't decided yet, but I'll put that out there. So that's all I have for now, Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Is there any other of my colleagues that would like to make any more comments? City Manager Contact.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Vice Mayor. I just want to put some comments out there for council consideration. I know we've heard this before, that we could have new leadership. Why do we want to make the change? We did take that into consideration, and that's why we brought forward only 2 of the 3 consolidations, because we said leave the one that's maybe a little bit more unusual as is and move forward with the 2 that are more the norm. It is an opportunity as part of the budget. If we left everything as is, I just wanted to note that we basically would have 430,000 or so of savings that would not be there, which means we would have to go back and relook at the proposals. And so just something that I wanted to make sure council was aware that if we leave things the way they are, which means you leave the 2 director positions vacant, or just do interim as we've been doing for the past year, we do lose the opportunity to consolidate functions that we really think are in the best interest of the city, which is why we brought it forward. I mean, that's our job, to bring those things forward to you. We felt like it was also giving us some savings through better services, better collaboration, and savings that allowed us to enhance other services. If we do want to go back to status quo, it will take a lot of reconsideration of other proposals. And I just want to put that out there. As you said, Vice Mayor, I mean, yes, it is the council that finally adopts the budget, and we're happy to bring whatever we do need to have an adopted budget by the end of the fiscal year. And again, we give you, when we said we're giving you our professional recommendations, it's based on operational considerations. You asked about the public works positions. Again, we've had a lot of discussions about what should be brought forward to you. So again, we'll take your feedback, and if the council consensus is for us to keep status quo, that's fine. We will just have to have quite a bit of changes to the proposal. So I just want to because that is a big general fund impact.
Thank you, City Manager Contact. So let me see, we have one more. Councilmember Lynn.
Thank you. If I can I ask a question to Director Andrade, please?
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council, Alex Andrade, Director of Economic Development and Interim Housing Lead.
Thank you, Director. Would you remind us again, why did you propose to consolidate yours and the housing team? What is the benefit of doing so that we can all, refresh and understand it better? Thank you.
Sure. So for the last 10 months, the housing team and the economic development teams have been working very well together. There's quite intersect between housing and economic development. A lot of that comes through the real estate work that we're doing at this point. We do real estate transactions, asset management. Obviously, both economic development has been buying, leasing, and we're actually tasked with selling one of our properties pretty soon on parcel 1, as we call it, on South Main Street. The housing team obviously is all about affordable housing and development. So there's a lot of intersection there as well. And as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, in the last 10 months or so, I've noticed that the housing is a very important part of the local economy through jobs, through construction. Obviously, there's just a lot of intersection there. Housing also creates revenues through property taxes. So there's a lot of intersectionality there. The two teams work well together. And I think one of the great benefits of having the two teams work together is the fact that you've heard me talk quite a bit about protecting our employment lands. And so land is limited, and protecting our employment lands actually has allowed me in my economic development hat to be at the table, also review housing plans and to talk about things such as mixed use, for example, retail on the ground floor, keep our commercial lands, but also residential above. We also have had the opportunity to review plans where we talk about where affordable housing is might be better located, for example. So obviously a lot of intersectionality between economic development and housing. And those are the main reasons at this point. Real estate, both of those very important items, economic development and real estate, are city council priorities. You have 7 city council priorities. One is economic development and job growth. The other one is housing and neighborhood services. And the two have been working very well together. Obviously, the housing team has done a great job. It's led by Robert Musalam, who does a great job as our manager. We have a great dynamic team. A lot of my role in bringing the two teams together has been leadership, making sure that projects and programs are moving forward on time, making sure that the staff is kept motivated and continue to do good work for the community.
Thank you. I just want all of us to hear from you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Councilmember Lin. Next, we have Councilmember Fan.
So something that I have always wondered about is if hotels and short-term rentals as Airbnb, if that counts, if that's considered housing, or if it's considered economic development, because in many ways it's kind of both. And to that end, I do want to commend the leadership of my colleagues. I know Councilmember Chua, Vice Mayor Chua was a huge proponent of the hotel vouchers. I think that hotels can do a lot to lift up our communities in need, not only through the revenue that it generates for the city, but through partnerships like the ones that we've established. So Alex, was it you that oversaw those vouchers, or if anyone can speak to that? Parks and Recs.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Renee Lorenzen, Director of Recreation and Community Services. And we did oversee the Emergency Motel Stays program.
And would you consider that program a success in the goals that it sought to accomplish? And what was the general feedback from our hotel partners?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think the success of the program is the rate of use. We originally started with about $14,000, I believe, in private donations. That money has been completely expended by the community. We have a couple of motel partners that we work very closely with to place the unhoused residents of Milpitas. We continue to place people as well, whether it be from medical emergencies, domestic violence in the home, or where they're staying at the time, or if it's inclement weather. So we continue to see a need, and we believe the program has been very successful in its referrals and use.
And coordinating with the hotels and their management, what was that process like? Would you have to reach out to them individually, or what kind of, what are the resources that we have to create a successful partnership and outreach effort?
Actually, a lot of the relationship that we build with the motels and the hotels started through efforts through economic development, but also during the pandemic. And we use them quite a bit in placing people that needed a place to stay. because of their status or if there were wildfires going on. So the relationship started there. Of course, any great relationship starts with trust. And so we reached out to the individual motels, explained what the program was, how we would operate it, how accessible we were to each other, and then following up back and forth with the program, how it works, and the success of the residents who are staying there. And so that ongoing relationship for the past more than a year now has been successful with the owners of the motels here in town.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess my next question is for Lauren. Sorry. Yeah, could you kind of give us an overview of our TOT revenue and where we anticipate it going with the current hotels in our inventory?
Certainly. Let me look in the budget book so I can be more precise about this. Great. So if you all have your budget book, I would like to call your attention to page 46.
46.
Yes, please. In the middle of the page, TOT is under the title Transient Occupancy Tax. So
Can we get that on the screen?
I don't think we have the table itself, but we do have a slide which shows sort of a percentage,
Sure,
and that's slide 40.
So in concept, pre-pandemic, TOT was at 14.5 million. When the pandemic hit and everything was closed, no travel, stay at home, it dropped to $4.2 million. In fiscal 21-22, that climbed up to 8 million. Where we are today, we are already at 8 million at 3/4 of the current fiscal year. We anticipate exiting this year at about 10.5, 11 million. Next year, we're contemplating we'll be at close to 12 million. So we're seeing a slow recovery. Actually, no, I would rephrase that. Because it tanked so bad, we're seeing a rapid recovery, but we're still not at pre-pandemic level. Because pre-pandemic level, without discounting it, we were at 14.5. Current year, we think we'll hit 11. And next year, we're thinking we're going to hit 12.
Thank you. And when does that sunset?
No sunset.
No sunset. Okay.
Yes. So the 14% rate that the voters approved has no sunset.
Okay. I think long term, we will probably be okay with the TOT revenues, but for the best interests of the city, we should prioritize initiatives to make our hotel successful with more. With more occupancy, and I think that is incumbent on staff's efforts. At the end of the day, that revenue will go back to the city's general fund, and it will we will be able to do things such as housing. But in the interest of coordinating at least interim housing, temporary housing, emergency housing, the partnerships that will need to be established, I think, requires coordination between our staff, including housing, including economic development. And that's one of the areas that, I would emphasize to my colleagues that it's as a value proposition of, potential continued success going forward. It's not to say we can't do it separately, but it would certainly make the process more efficiently. And And then the other thing, I guess, going back is I want to revisit. I'm good now, Lauren. Thank you very much. You've answered my questions really well. I want to just again revisit the organizational chart. Instead of proposing so much reorganization at the director levels, I think we have a unique opportunity to ask ourselves if we want to reorganize the executive levels during a time when there's a lot of economic uncertainty. We would certainly be planning things long-term fiscally, and we're in a position where we're able to do that. But it has to start somewhere, and the conversation is a budget conversation. This would be the appropriate time to have that conversation, because otherwise we'll probably keep doing things the way they are and never revisit it again. So I would, challenge encourage my colleagues to think long-term fiscally. How can we make these critical strategic decisions that will save the city millions in the long run?
Thank you, Councilmember Fan. Next, we have Vice Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that what Director Lorenzen and also Councilmember Fan said about the hotel voucher. We used up all that 14,000 already, but I want to share with everybody. I found out that Supervisor Lee was having grants for this type of charity work, and I found it like literally 24 hours before the deadline, 5:00 that Friday. So I emailed and I tapped on Matt, and Matt got Renee and Alex to work on it, and they were able to submit it within that 24 hours. And I just want to thank you guys for that great job. And we hope we get that $25,000 for the hotel voucher. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'd like to say a few words, if I may. First of all, I want to thank staff for all your hard work on this proposed budget. And as you know, I was not in favor of the part of the reorg for the economic development and housing. I think, as I mentioned, economic development needs to stand alone. And the reason being, economic development is what brings the businesses. And we all know that businesses bring in more revenue than housing. That's a fact. So this is why I felt really strong that we do not merge those two. I've also been listening to my colleagues, and I've also been thinking, as I mentioned this to the city manager, acting city manager earlier today, I've been rethinking that perhaps we should not make any changes until we get a new city manager, which will be in about 3 or 4 months. I, for one, would like to just keep the status quo, keep things as they are. This gives the opportunity for a new city manager to come in, and they will be able to make those decisions. I think we owe it to whoever it will be that comes to our city. Imagine if you came in and there were some major changes made and you didn't really have the opportunity to make any changes. So I think that for me, for my one vote, I would like to just keep the status quo and wait And we'd go over the budget every year, even mid-year. So those are my thoughts on this. Does anyone have any other comments? Councilmember Lynn?
Thank you. Staff's been working hard to bring the proposal to us with the saving of $433,000. And I think if there's a new city manager walking in here, if he has the experience, he or she has the experience up to taking that role, he would have no problem. And besides, during the study session, I said, or I proposed, if we consolidate the econ director and the housing team together, and if it doesn't work 3 months or 6 months down the line, undo it. So I'm going to go with the proposal with the staff. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Lynn. Next, we have Vice Mayor Chua.
Just for clarification for Mayor, you're not in, for now, just for now, you're not in favor of reclassifying
Of the reorg, no.
the reorg. But there are some positions that we need, I think we need to fill, like the ones in public works. Would that be?
That to me, that would be an exception, Public Works, because that's the one that really needs it. However, the other ones I propose not to
Make changes.
make changes,
Okay.
not to reclassify.
So can I go ahead and go make some recommendations on the ones that I think
Please.
on the public works? I would like to see the maintenance workers. I would listen to the staff to make 2 maintenance workers 2 and reclassify 1 worker maintenance 2 to 3. And I want to add another one for the fleet because the fleet maintains our trucks, fire trucks, our police cars and our public works, and they need, if we're going to have an efficient way of servicing our residents, they need an extra help on the fleet service. And that's public works. And also in public works, there are some things that we have to have, like this cross connection specialist. Can Christian help, please? The cross connection specialist, we need that to safeguard against contamination. This is required by the state, correct?
Yes, it is.
So we need to have that. And there is another one that we need to have. Which one is that one?
The environmental inspector as well.
Environmental
Yes.
inspector. So that one. Is there anything else that I'm missing?
That are regulatory required. Just those 2 for now.
Just those 2. What about the SCADA instrument control technicians? We need that one, I know, right?
We need somebody to maintain the supervisory control and data acquisition system, SCADA system, once it's been fully deployed. Yes.
Right. And the environmental inspector, we need that one as well.
The environmental inspector is important for us to comply with the regional permit. The inspector runs our FOG program, fat, soil, and grease program, some of which right now we contract out, $50,000 of which we would reabsorb that into the functions. That contract only
inspects about a third of the facilities that annually need to be inspected. So it's not even sufficient as it is. Plus, the position will also inspect for illicit discharges. And
Okay,
that's a regulatory requirement.
okay. So that's all right for Public Works, basically. Okay. And thank you, Christian. And,
Did staff get that? Can you repeat that again?
oh,
Uh,
Christian, you want to repeat it? Or- Please.
Or what you want, what you, the
I can
equipment
repeat,
maintenance
yeah.
worker?
So, okay, just when I say the thing, just say yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we start with the instrument control technician, the environmental inspector, the one for the fleet and one for the street maintenance worker and one for the landscape or street, one for public works inspector, and one for cross connection specialist for the prevent contamination. Did I miss anything?
Got that?
Wow. So the fleet position is a new one. It's not one that the department has recommended. It recommended it to the city manager's office initially, but that is not a maintenance worker position. That's a high level equipment maintenance 3 position that would be needed
Right,
if we were to consider that. And that position would fill a quasi supervisory role. So yeah, and the inspector is also not one that we had. The environmental inspector, yes, but the conversion of the temp inspector for public services and engineering is an engineering position that I wouldn't speak to if the 2 departments didn't merge. So I can't speak to that requirement, but I can speak to the environmental inspector requirement.
okay, so how many do you need now? The 3 maintenance workers.
So I'm hearing 2 maintenance workers, 1 for streets and 1 for trees and landscape.
Right,
And then what's being recommended by you at least is another position in fleet.
yes.
And that is not a maintenance worker. That would be a utility maintenance worker 3
That's
position, much higher caliber.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay, so those in cross connection, environmental inspector, and instrument control technician.
And
correct?
the upgrade of a vacant maintenance worker 2 to a 3, which would provide us a secondary crew lead position, so we can split and have a crew leader for parks and for landscape.
Perfect.
And I think that might be it. Yes.
Hi, Vice Mayor Matt Kano, Deputy City Manager. I just want to add on the Public Works Inspector, which is currently in the Engineering Department, which would be part of the Public Works Department if we merge. That position has been filled. That is a position we have been using for a while now, but it's been filled. It's been filled with temporary workers, and we haven't been able to retain anyone. And the workload necessitates it with the capital projects we have going on. So in order to have better retention in the future, that's why we're proposing that Public Works Inspector be an ongoing permanent position as opposed to a temporary position. And so that's the purpose of that.
Okay. So that's, what's the name of the job?
The title?
Job.
Public Works Inspector, I think. I'm just making.
Okay, that's the one. And I go to,
So I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, there was also, I didn't hear you mention the restoring the equipment maintenance worker
I think I,
to maintain our facilities as
Right.
well.
yeah,
Yes.
perfect.
Uh-huh.
So how many total?
Sounds like 8, if I'm doing the math right. 7 that was staff recommended, plus
But
the
we're
addition
adding
of
the
1 for fleet.
Okay, 8.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And now we go to Parks and Recs. And there's a recommendation for 1 supervisor. I think that's okay. My recommendation, we can vote on that one. Police, there's 1 temporary for 2 years. And I'm on the fence on that one, but I would because of the job description that was said earlier, I mean, on May 9th, that was introduced by Mayor, I would go with that one as well. For information technology, we will leave it alone for now, but we need a status every 3 months on how that is going. We're not going to defund those two positions, my recommendations, but we need to have the status on hiring and retention. Okay. Human resource is okay. It's just a title change. Finance, because it's already there. I would go there as well. And community development. I would leave the old status quo on this one. No changes. Community development, no change. We leave it the way it was today. And where's that at? City manager. We will leave it the way it is today with the housing and economic development under one department, but no new hire of management analysts. That's my recommendation. And
Is that a motion?
yes.
Oh, I second that. Oh, President. Oh, you can't make a motion. Can you clarify, City Attorney?
I believe this item's just on for feedback, and you'll be looking at adopting the
Oh, I see.
budget on June 6th.
Oh, I see. Okay. Those are my feedback, and I open it up for, the
So
rest of the
recommendations.
council.
And next we have, thank you, Vice Mayor. We have Councilmember.
Thank you.
Burpan.
Can you go to like the first slide? And if we can pull it up on the screen.
So which slide, Councilmember Fan?
Just the beginning. Okay, so second to last bullet point. I'm sorry, not second to last. Third to last bullet point. Well, that's a CIP discussion. Would today be the appropriate time to discuss that?
Yes, Councilmember Fan, because we had brought it up as one-time funding discussion at the study session. That's why it's before you today, even though the CIP was adopted, this 450,000 wasn't included there. So it would be fine to discuss that and give us direction today.
Okay. And I recall council direction being given on that item, and it was unanimous. And so why are we seeing it again?
Because it was brought up at the May 9 study session.
Was there a vote?
No, so at the May 9 study session, we really heard from individual council members. And then as we said today, we tried to address as many things as we could. So
Understood, but
that's in front of you today.
I understand. Were there at least 3 individual council members who brought that item forward?
No, Councilmember Fan.
Okay.
We did not do kind of a consensus or majority on May 9th.
Okay. So why is it here?
Several ideas that were brought up by individuals are on this list. So that's one of them. And again, we're looking really for council consensus today on
Okay.
all these items, right? Because when we bring it to you for adoption, what we're talking about today now are big changes even compared to May 9th. So we do need to get consensus today on any direction moving forward to bring you a budget you can adopt.
Okay. No, that's fine. And I think I'm happy to have that conversation again. But I just want to make sure going forward that, we set a best practice, that, if ideas are being proposed, that there's actually a consensus before it returning, regardless of what the item is. So, yeah, I would love to have that conversation. If now is the time to do it, if whoever brought it back, if you want to, bring up why, since we did have that conversation already, what has deviated? Yeah, and if my colleagues want to chime in there, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councilmember Fan. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay, seeing none. So the city council feedback, what would you like for us to, do you want some more recommendations of what to prioritize?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I think what would be really helpful for us to get some council consensus, maybe even though you're not taking a direct vote, some of these changes, I mean, going back to status quo is a significant change. We want to make sure there's consensus from council. At the May 9th study session, we heard concerns about economic development and housing, but we thought we heard broad support for the other two consolidations. So if that's a change in direction, it would be good to hear from the majority of the council, because again, that is a significant change. And what we would need to do is kind of look for, like I said, those savings now, right? If we may have to relook at some of these proposals to make sure we can balance the budget.
Okay, thank you. And so I do know that we do have savings right now. We haven't filled the housing director, Sharon Goey's position. So we haven't filled Eric Stevens' position. So, and then there are a few positions that have not been filled. So it's not like we're not making a savings with the status quo. So
just a clarification. So for positions, when they're budgeted, we have to account for the funding, whether they're going to be left vacant or not. If they're shown as funded positions in the budget, we have to come up with the money to fund them. So right now, the savings that you are seeing is because we're actually deleting 2 director positions. If we kept them as is, we would have to fund them. We couldn't just have them in the budget and not fund them. And so again, to balance the budget, we'd have to make some changes. And we can certainly do that, but it would be good to get council consensus. And then if I could just speak to, I think Vice Mayor had mentioned the management analyst position. That's not a general fund position. So that wouldn't help with the savings. So I just want to make sure that that's understood. And that is a recommendation we had made related to the risk part of managing the task fund. So we'd still recommend it. But again, it's council consensus.
thank you. Is there any? Vice Mayor Chua?
I think by the end of the year, which is 6 months, we have more clarity on the challenges that you staff and us enumerated, and you can always come back and justify the position. But right now, I don't recommend it.
And I want to also reiterate there is, I know we have all those other challenges, on the economy, for example, we're discussing how the inflation, the war in Europe, high interest rates, supply chains challenges, tech company layoffs, the banking sector uncertainty. And now I see it in the news every day about the national default. So all these things, I think it's to be cautious. I would rather just wait, as the vice mayor also alluded to. So this is just information only, and the direction you want us to take is I do feel that there is one area in there that I do agree with. Well, actually, I agree with all of if you can put that back up, the list.
Which slide would you like, Mayor?
The one that,
Is it the city council
the one that,
feedback or the?
that was city council feedback. Thank you. So I do agree with all of those. And the reason why I agree with the city attorney is because I feel that they need to be close together. So when they interact, they don't have to go upstairs and all over the building to communicate. I think that's one of the reasons why I feel the funding for the city attorney. And also for the Black April, I agree with that. I also, and it's going to be funded every year. So, and I would also like to take turns for other groups. So that's why I'm okay with that. Consider now this one, the vacant building inspector. I think that's the one that. Yeah, that's the one that we're not funding. So, yeah, I just want a status quo. So, I'll have the council member, Sheila. Vice Mayor.
On the first item, we are doing the status quo, so it will remain the same. Economic development housing will still be under economic development. This one, the first one.
Yeah. Yes, I agree.
Thank you.
For now. Yeah.
So you mean just on an interim basis? Is that? I just want to clarify, because you said housing will be under economic development.
That's how we.
That's just on an interim basis, right? Housing is part of building safety. And just as an interim basis, because the director's vacant, we've kind of split up the two functions.
Whatever.
Okay. Okay.
Until.
Oh, sorry. Whatever the setup is now, Ashwini, we'll leave it the way it is. Thank you.
So are you clear with that?
Yes. So could we, on the two proposed consolidations, could we have kind of just direction from the council as a whole? Because again, that's a significant change. If we want to come back to you with all of that figured out for the adoption, it would be good to kind of get that consensus just for the two proposed consolidations. And if that is the case, and maybe I'll need Director Lai to help me with some of these numbers, but we're talking about taking out the savings, the 433,000. We're also talking about adding a fleet equipment maintenance worker and not defunding the vacant building inspector. So to me, that's adding up to maybe about 800 to 900,000. So I think we'll need those costs because that's what we'll have to balance.
Yeah, if you can bring back the numbers, I think that's the most important part. And we might have to just, when you come back again, we might have to decide, well, maybe we won't fund that inspector as you had proposed. So when you come back with all the numbers, and we could decide then.
I'd like to provide those numbers now because in principle, it's really important. If we don't consolidate, it's $455,000 from the general fund. If we add another maintenance worker position, 2 or 3, we're looking at another 160 or 170,000. If we fund the vacant inspector, it's about 200,000. So in summary, right there, that's almost $900,000.
Okay.
So we have to find that in new ongoing revenues or reach into savings or make cuts elsewhere.
Yeah, we'll just come back when you come back with the numbers and then we will decide then.
I feel we need more direction with all due respect.
Well, do you need some concrete direction now about some of these positions that you're talking about?
So Mayor, I think what Director Lai is saying is based on the direction today, what we're hearing from you, we would have to find a way to cut about $900,000 in cost, which means you would see something new in the proposed, kind of the next version of the proposed budget, which we have not discussed. And we wouldn't want to come to you for adoption with a whole bunch of new information because now we're talking about making cuts. So we would have to bring forward some recommendations to cut services in other areas that are about $900,000 worth.
Vice Mayor Chua?
Well, what about the savings from not hiring the Sharon's position and the Eric's position? Did you take that into consideration?
But those are vacancy savings. So as I was kind of maybe didn't do a good job of explaining, when we are budgeting, we need to actually fund those positions, right? Vacancy savings, we realize after the fiscal year closes, but we cannot budget based on vacancy savings. I mean, that is not a good practice to do. So if we are talking about defunding those positions, we could do that. We could just defund 2 director positions.
Mhm.
We would just have to, not fill them and just keep that.
Right.
And that's one way to do it. But they would not really be technically positions. They would be defunded positions.
Yes, that sounds good.
Okay. Anyone have?
And Mayor, could I just ask clarification on the city manager one? I heard Vice Mayor Chua say status quo, except for the no management analyst. So status quo as in what's shown in the proposed budget? With kind of not the housing where it is just sort of the interim arrangement of housing under economic development and then just not adding the management analyst. Is that what you mean by? Okay. Thank you.
I need clarification. Is the direction to come back with the organization as is, such that we have building safety housing, planning, engineering, and that those organizations, 2 of those organizations would not have director positions funded? Is that the consensus?
I can think of other areas to not fund, to balance the budget there. And I'm looking at our executive budget, namely, well, at least for this fiscal year, for the CIP on the city attorney's office space. If we're going by status quo, we can only make so many exceptions, and I'm actually okay with the exceptions. But the exception in this, but in this case, the status quo would be to not have the office upgrades. So at the very least for this fiscal year, that would put us at what, 600, 700,000?
So if I understand, we would table the renovation project,
Defunded.
be funded. Okay, so in the adopted CIP budget, council gave us direction not to move forward with the project.
Mhm.
So that money is already set aside and not associated with the project. So if I hear what's happening is maybe using that 450 for another purpose,
Yes.
because, okay.
Yeah.
And
So
our-
that would give you 450 to work with.
Yes. So in concept, what we're moving towards is using one-time revenues, one-time savings to fund ongoing services and positions. I just want us to be mindful of that. And the hope is next year will be stronger than we anticipate, or that the hope is in 24, 25, in year two, the budget will continue to carry these positions. I just want us to be mindful that these are some policy decisions we're making tonight.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
I think that in terms of what we would have voted on versus what wasn't available to begin with, I think going that route temporarily addresses that. Personally, I wouldn't dip into savings to begin with, but I understand the passion of my colleagues in retaining some of the services we currently provide. But that's just the infrastructure side. Operationally, the department itself is over $1 million in our budget, and that's from general fund revenues. If we were to make cost savings recommendations there, that even if it's not the entire 1 point whatever million, that's still a huge chunk of change that wouldn't be dipping into savings and would address that. Or we can take a look at other executive positions, because at the end of the day, my philosophy has always been that if before we make cuts that impact employees on a broader scale, we need to take a look at the top levels of management. So, do we really need multiple city attorneys, multiple city managers? That's something to be discussed. And so I'll leave the conversation at that. But I've suggested a couple of areas where you can work towards balancing that budget there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fan. And now we have Councilmember Lin.
Thank you. I lost my thoughts here. No, I just feel that we cannot put off this weeks after weeks. Decide on it so that the business can move. And to me, if the staff present the financial statement with the balance and the savings, I mean, to me, it's no brainer. So you guys need to decide and act on it instead of saying, okay, let's bring it back again. And then 2 weeks later, when staff present the same thing again, and all the questions will be asked again, like this is the very first time we listened to this presentation. So that's my thought.
Thank you. Next, we have Councilmember Barbadillo.
No. I hope it will not be a blow. All right. So what I'm hearing is it's either or, and there's nothing in the middle. You know, I listened to the thoughts of the mayor and vice mayor, and they do have a good point. And I do listen at the staff, and you do have a good point. 900,000. But if both of you stands on firm on your position, we will not pass a budget. So we should have a compromise. A compromise either coming from either side, which means all right, we will have to look for sources of that 900,000. But this is something that we can get it from because we will analyze that somewhere to be less of an effect other than spending that 900,000 on a status quo as an idea of the mayor and the vice mayor. Because I'm torn, I'll be honest. And if I'm not presented with an alternate facts other than the position that we're gonna have to find 900,000, I'll go with their ideas. So here's my thoughts. I'm going to be a bit aggressive, and I'll follow the thought of Councilmember Fan, looking at the executive level. So again, this is just a thought. You'll come back with what probably you could have thought of the thought that I will give today. Is that I've been in a council before with one city manager, right? And for reasons it had during my time, we changed it in a 3-person city manager, right? We have a short span of timeline to look at and review. As Councilmember Fan said, I think this is the time. How about we review what positives and less consequences and it's not too far, as I said, probably 6, 7, 8 years ago, the structure of a one city manager and the 3 structured city manager as we have now, right? And because nobody thought of that. We thought about combining things. We thought about the funding this, but nobody thought of an alternate possibility that would solve the conflicting ideas of some of the council and the recommendation of the staff. So let's look at that. I don't know what it will be, but hopefully on the next meeting, there is an alternative, at least, the very least, other than what Vice Mayor and Mayor has suggested as status quo, other than what staff has suggested that we will lose and have to find a source of 900,000. I'm looking on that in between, whether it's the city manager's office or what Councilmember Fan has suggested, city attorney's office. At least on my one thought and one vote, I would want to see what could it be as a meeting point of should we say 436 and combine them, and let's not maintain status quo, or let's maintain status quo and look at where we could source 900,000. So I'm just looking something in between for consideration. And my idea is the executive level, based not on nothing more but the history of those positions. They said probably we can have something to look back, look on, comparing the dense structure to what it is now. That's my thought. I think that's a solution, as a compromise, other than just to decide on their side or the staff recommendation. I don't know the solution. That's why if we take a vote now, I do not know. And I'll be honest. As I said, I can go with the recommendation of the mayor and council, but I understand that it will be hard for the staff, for us to find alternatives. I can go with the recommendation with staff as it is, but I also worry about the points of the two ladies sitting beside us, right? Because they're right. We are in a transition right now. We are in a mid-year, and if we make all of these big decisions, hard to pull back. So the only question I had with their position is it fine to wait? And I'm tending to believe that if you don't offer any solution other than, all right, we'll just look for sources, we go for a status quo. So the solution, I think, is, we be presented again and we learn together a median, a meeting point between your position and the mayor and the vice mayor's position. I think that's the solution. And it will happen, hopefully, when we presented that next meeting. Right. No, all I'm asking is alternatives. Alternatives, because the next meeting, now we will vote on what they want. And then we will look at that vote to the suggestion of the mayor and vice mayor to what will staff bring. What happens if nothing was in between? Then I'm forced to choose into one. And both of you have reasons. It will be a bit detrimental to where we are without compromise and without median. That's my thoughts.
Thank you, Councilmember Barbadillo.
Thank you, Mayor.
Is there anyone else that would like to make any comments?
No, I agree with my colleague, Councilmember Barbadillo. I think it's a difficult conversation to have, but we're supposed to be making difficult decisions, and it's hard to make everybody happy. But I think at the end of the day, if we take a look long term at the city's fiscal sustainability, it makes the most sense to take a look at the areas that may take up a large chunk of the budget, and to that end, we should start with executive. I would say that just like how every other department has brought forward, these are our accomplishments. These are what we've been able to do last fiscal year, and this is why we need the funding and whatnot. Executive staff should be doing the same thing. At the end of the day, we're one organization, and I think that's a good. Well, it's a way to do it that achieves the goals for this budget, and it's very fiscally conservative. Yes, it's bold, it's controversial, but long term, looking back, we can point that moment in time, that decision that we made, allowed us to have this fiscal strength, this fiscal this allowed us to be in the green, years down the road. So I agree with my colleague there.
Thank you, Councilmember Fan. Vice Mayor Chua.
Piggybacking on both, my council members, and Councilmember Fan and Councilmember Barbadillo, we need to instill, I'm talking to the executive management, we need to instill a culture of service, but at the same time, preservation of revenue, revenue preservation, and revenue generation. We cannot rely solely on economic development department. We have to look at each department. How can each department contribute to revenue generation? For example, we have facilities at Parks and Rec. Can we use that to generate revenue? We have facilities over at Senior Center. Can we use that? Every one of us, of all the teams, can generate revenue and at the same time measured expenses, meaning preserving the revenue. All of us, there should be a culture of service with revenue generation and preservation. I think we need to start looking at each department and evaluating how we can contribute, like getting grants, like each department should be conscious of getting grants. Each department should be conscious of contracts. You know, if the contract is being renewed, how can I make this? How can I save some revenue by proposing a contract that's favorable to us? That's what I'm trying to say. We can't rely on economic development. A big chunk of it is from economic development, but we can contribute to it by revenue growth and measured expenditure. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And I just want to make a couple of comments on, I really do believe that there is potential out there to increase our revenues. Some areas have not been tapped. And I will give you one good example. We used to have a child care center, and the city, it was a revenue generator, but it's now the rooms are empty. But I really believe that we could rent those spaces out and bring in revenue. The teen center, that's another one. And also our sports fields, we should be having banners. To advertisement banners. So I think we need to start thinking of other ways, as Vice Mayor mentioned, to start increasing our revenues, not just business development, but also use what we have to try to start bringing in revenues. But that's for another, hopefully the leadership. And is there anyone else that would like to make any more comments before City Manager Contact? Do you have any comments that you'd like to say on this City Council feedback?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So Director Lai is just going to summarize. So we just want to make sure we have clarity on the direction from Council today when we come back to you.
Great. With all due respect, I hope I've discerned what I just heard well, and be gentle if I did not. So what I heard is there's a growing consensus that we want to keep things as is. So on June 6th, when we bring this back, there will be no consolidation of any of the departments. And so I just want to acknowledge that's what we heard. Also, we heard support for an additional maintenance worker. So specifically, we have 5 in the original proposed budget. Tonight, we presented 2 more maintenance worker, and we heard there's growing support for a 3rd. So in total, Public Works would have 8 additional FTEs. Third, we also heard a growing consensus that we would fund the vacant building inspector position. So I want to pause there to make sure that there's some majority support for that when we bring it back. So the organizational structure will be as is. Add 3 more FTEs in maintenance worker from the proposed budget, and then also to keep the vacant inspector position. And then if there is agreement to that, I think the direction to staff is to come back with a proposed or budget ready to be adopted with various ways of balancing this service level, either by way of cutting costs or looking at revenue opportunities that we can tweak further in the budget. So I want to pause and get confidence around the budget, especially the services that we want to include and the organizational structure you want us to bring back on June 6th.
And if I could just add to that, I think we also heard support, given that we are going to stay status quo for a bit, that we could potentially have 2 director positions to kind of rebalance the cost, could have 2 director positions defunded. So we wouldn't plan on filling them and they wouldn't need to be factored into the budget.
Or we can alternatively look at maybe a half-year funding as various opportunities with how we present this.
So any comments from my colleagues? Councilman.
I think consensus was provided earlier that the status quo would exist, at least in the meantime, for what we're doing currently with housing and economic development. So I want to make sure that, you know, that's concise. Yeah. And the other thing was that I did not hear more than one person's support for moving forward with funding the city attorney's office renovations. So I want to make that clear. If anybody wants to speak up, now's your time.
So I know I heard you on that item, and I know you're adamant about not putting that forward. So if we take that away from the 450, that would leave us with, how much would that leave us with? And then
I just want to confirm, I think what I heard there is that we would not appropriate the project and that possibly that 450 could be used as one-time funding. So
but you're talking about, so Councilmember Fan, if you can clarify, you're talking about all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 items to just not even
That's
fund
not what I
those.
said.
Okay, go ahead and repeat.
Yeah.
I think you just said just the one, you're targeting 1, 2, 3, the 5th one, the city attorney office.
It's not that hard, Mayor. It's I'm referring
No, it's this one, the
to
city attorney one.
the city attorney's
Mhm.
office renovations with the one-time funding for that CIP project to not fund it.
Well, if we're going to, the way I see it, if you're going to fund the other ones, you might as well fund that one as well. So that was
Okay,
my,
that's your opinion.
yeah, that's my
and,
opinion.
And you know, we have
It's-
decided this in previous meetings, and it's on the floor. If anybody else wants to support your recommendation,
It's on the floor. Anyone can support it.
going once.
Vice Mayor Chu, hold on.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Fan. I heard an alternative from acting city manager at one point, and I would like to explore that without costing 450,000. And you can bring that back next time.
Thank you. You can bring that back for the alternative. And now we have Councilmember Barbadillo.
Right. What I haven't heard is my recommendation to look at the structure of the city manager's office and the possibility that we cut one as form of savings to compensate what we will be spending on a proposed status quo. As I said, if you leave me next time with no alternative, either or, one will take the fall. So hopefully there's a presentation on that structure where we can, have second thoughts and at least meet compromise.
Thank you, Councilmember Barbadillo. Is there anyone else? Okay, I think that's it. Okay, so Yes, that's a contact. Yeah, we have one more.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I think we have your feedback. We will come back to you on June 6th with a proposed, kind of an updated proposed budget based on the feedback we heard today.
Okay, great. I have one more question, Ms. Contact, Manager Contact. On the, so I was going to ask you if we, on the revenues that we do collect, that we have, are those, does interest collected on that?
Yes, it is.
And what happens to that interest?
We use it and we actually place it in different, so depending on where we place it, we get different interest rates, and I'll have Director Light speak.
And then is that also, is that, those revenues, is that also used in a investment portfolio too?
So,
Yes, so the city's portfolio is professionally managed and it yields dividends and interest. Such revenues, if they come from restricted revenues, are then those interest and dividend incomes are then put into those restricted funds. General,
Can you repeat that? It's put into what?
restricted funds.
Restricted funds, okay.
The portion that is allocated to the general fund gets pulled into the general fund. It's included in the proposed budget, and then we render services based on that.
Okay, so it's put back into the general fund, so it's,
Correct.
but it's restricted.
Only funds that are restricted, such as, let's say, CDBG money or HUD money, where we have fund balances and those fund balances are invested, interest related to those balances have to go to those housing funds. General fund balances that earn dividends and interest, those interests and dividends are included in the general fund budget, and then we turn those into services.
Okay, great. And that, I was just curious about that. I wanted to ask you before we.
No problem.
So next we'll go on to our announcements. So Acting City Manager, do you have any announcements?
thank you, Mayor. I do not.
Okay, so before we adjourn to closed session, City Attorney Muto. Well, we have our Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. In lieu of the email that we got from one of the residents at 1000 Hillview, and I've asked Acting City Manager to draft a letter to Supervisor Otto Lee asking for help, asking to give us some assistance to address the challenges that we have now, and they're fairly serious issues that we have over there. And I would like to ask the City Council for approval of the letter to Supervisor Otto Lee to ask for help.
So is there a general consensus from the council to grant that?
The letter from.
Is there a general consensus? Yes. Councilmember Barbadillo?
Well, that's a noble idea, and I'm fine.
So there's a consensus from the council and Councilmember Fan, Councilmember. Maybe, do you want me to just go on down the line then? Okay. Okay, everybody. So there is a general consensus, and we will do that. Okay. So now, but before we go, we adjourn to closed session. So City Attorney Muto Posse, please brief the public on the closed session items for today.
Thank you, Mayor. You have one closed session item for today, public employee performance evaluation pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957, position city attorney.
Okay, thank you. So I guess we'll call for a public comment on the closed session item. Is there anyone in the public that would like to say any? Mr. Montemayor, please come on down.
Voltaire Montemayor, Milpitas. It's hard. It won't be everybody's happy tonight, I would say. We had standstill, so it's very hard. I'm considering my only little knowledge in as a special dispersing officer, and then as a coach, as a player, you don't know to sacrifice the rules and the bishop few pawns. In other words, it's very hard. We're not singling out anyway. So I understand the position of me as in the public, the staff, they're knocking the door, and the job of the elected officers. So we're doing great. Thank you. Still with a smile, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Montemayor. And now we will be going to closed session. Thank you. And we will come back later. Thank you. Meeting call to order. It is now 9:02 and I will report out from closed session. The city council has conducted the city attorney's performance evaluation and determined that overall, the city attorney's service to the city of Milpitas meets expectations. And I will now adjourn the meeting. Thank you.